David Tulis, and there is a dispute that you need to hear just a word about, and that is who is the biggest Nooga centrist in Chattanooga? Is it me, or is it our leading statesman Dave Crockett, who says he's the biggest because he's 6'5" and and wears a very large hat, a 10-gallon hat? And we are going to ask Dave Crockett to analyze this city's future and the prospect of the city's future in light of a somewhat slightly moldy prediction from a noted, extremely influential writer named Chuck Marohn, who is the founder of strongtowns.org and who, in fact, was in Chattanooga not too long ago and chatted with Mayor Andy Burke and many other notables in town about the prospect for growth and the idea of the city center. One of his main ideas is that cities are stagnating because of zoning and many other problems, and that he agrees with other analysts that say in a city, the center is where the prosperity is. If you judge by tax receipts per acre, if you go by the per acre way of measuring, city centers are where the prosperity is. And the further out you go with the infrastructure leading the way, you have long-term debt. You have a crisis in the making. He calls it a municipal or a growth Ponzi scheme where the new money pays for the old repairs in what he says is an unfunded liability for infrastructure maintenance crisis ahead. And so I'm going to ask Dave Crockett this. We're going to talk about kind of the same things we've mentioned before, but I'm going to come at him with that, with a question about is it possible that this extremely influential and right-minded analyst with a very strong free market perspective, is it possible that Chuck Marohn is right, Dave Crockett?
100%. And these are themes that were very strongly talked about during the 90s. And I belonged to a group called City States, which was a conglomeration of people from different skill sets, from the chairman of Amtrak to the president of joint venture Silicon Valley, and legislators, mayors, economists from all over the country. And we worked with cities and regions all over the country. One of our members, Peter Katz, actually did the Sarasota study that Chuck mentioned in one of his reports, David.
Well, explain, go rehearse what the problem is. The problem in a nutshell, well, maybe you can give it a nutshell, maybe with more detail than I'm giving, but in a nutshell, that cities take, when they put infrastructure in, whether sewers or roads or bridges or water lines, they get development with about a dime of benefit on the tax rolls, but they take on $1 in long-term liabilities that have about a 25-year cycle. So right, how does that work? What's the problem, and what can we do about it?
Well, it's just like business. I was talking to one of my friends who was a county commissioner, and he owned a tire company, Coker Tire, and I put it to him this way: when we had one of our colleagues in, Peter Katz, in the mid-90s, talking about this subject, and we put it in terms of his tire store. Would you open another couple of tire stores if you had about the same number of customers? You didn't gain customers. You just essentially started serving them in different locales. And he said, of course not. He said, you got to understand business. We'd go out of business doing that, because if you got the same revenue and you're increasing your fixed and variable cost, you go out of business. And essentially that's what we've done in American cities, and we've done in spades in Chattanooga. We have a footprint in land area that's larger than Chattanooga, and we actually have more larger than Atlanta, and we have more road miles of asphalt than the city of Atlanta. But
wait, now back up. My ears are ringing with this suggestion. Say that again, because I'm not quite believing you. Go ahead.
Well,
repeat that.
It's real easy. Just Google that on the internet, as George Bush would say, the city of Chattanooga is larger in land area by about 10 square miles than the city of Atlanta. And we have more miles of paved road than the city of Atlanta.
So what has the city of Atlanta done right by not annexing surrounding counties?
Well, the city of Atlanta hadn't done anything, to be honest with you. What it's done is tried to make the city of Atlanta more favorable to draw people in because they have no annexation ability. And they are constrained by the same kind of rules that the legislators are trying to put in place in Tennessee, have put in place in Tennessee. And those kind of rules that the people in the state legislature has passed will guarantee the city's long-term demise and the state's long-term bankruptcy.
All right. So you're saying Chattanooga faces a bankruptcy in some out years. Number one, how many out years is that?
And
number two,
number of out years.
Is that like 30 years, 25 years?
It could be long? It could be a half a century, is 50 years, which is not a long time.
Why was there going to be an insolvency? Explain that. I don't get it.
We won't be able to, as a state and as counties, we won't be able to maintain the infrastructure that we have built, because we have continued to build it further and further out. There are more and more roads being built in the unincorporated areas. There's a proposed sewer expansion in Ooltewah, and we continue to add more and more sheriff's deputies. We intend and continue to add services. And in the out years, right now, 70% of those, about 80% of those, of the cost of those services is on the residents of East Ridge and Red Bank and the Lookout, all the incorporated areas.
Can we separate out? I think we need to separate out two things here. One is investment in infrastructure, which would be sewers, roads, bridges, water mains, water cleaning facilities, and services are kind of short-term expenditures. But capital investment, right? Capital investment to create more growth, right? To bring more growth, to increase the tax base by having new shops build, factories build, new shopping centers, and so on. Those are all going to bring tax revenues. There's a short-term gain in those tax revenues, but the infrastructure itself gets old and needs repair. And
there's not they are immediate losers. They never
who's
show
they? The cities.
When you start building that far out of your existing infrastructure with capital and with the variable cost, you never show a day of net gain. Never show a day of net gain. And
why do you not show a net gain ever?
Well, because you have more money going out than you have coming in.
Even though you're getting new taxes from new businesses building shopping centers.
You're not getting new taxes. You're getting different taxes. You're getting the same taxes at a different place and with a higher fixed and variable income. So you're not getting new anything. You're just shifting the place where you collect it. That's all you're doing. And in the process, that's like I was saying with the tire store. If you opened up 2 more locations and were getting the same revenue, you're just getting it in different places. But you have doubled and tripled your fixed and variable costs. So you may have customers going out to a new store, but that's not new revenue.
So cities. All right, we're talking with Dave Crockett, and this is David Tulis. If you have a question about what we're discussing, it's 800-8949. That's 800-8949. Call in and join the conversation. Or if you want, change the subject. We are here to discuss your questions, your issues, your problems, even if you want to call in on really any topic at all. And Dave Crockett, by my suggestion, is our leading statesman. He ran for mayor against Andy Burke in the last election, and he works as a consultant around the country, a city's consultant. He is a former city council member, 3 terms, and was in his terms a kind of mayoral person, a kind of executive person, but in the legislative branch of city government, and was I would say probably instrumental in some of the downtown projects that we had, investing in downtown, making the downtown more valuable. And that is what Chuck Marohn is saying. Make your city center the place where people want to be, and that's where your prosperity is. That seems to be the argument of strongtowns.org, Dave.
Well, it is, but it goes broader than that, David. It is to have a strategic financial plan and a strategic plan. How is the city going to compete? How is it going to do more than I call winning? If you're better than you were yesterday, that's a win. Being competitive is that you're measuring against the leading competitors and you're beating them. And that's something you can't do on the strategic course that we're on.
This is David Tulis, and caller, thanks for your ringing us. What's on your mind?
What do you think are the three major issues facing Chattanooga? That is, the people, not necessarily the government, but the people. And what would you do to resolve them?
Well, the issues are investments in all of the neighborhoods to bring them up to places that are safe, livable, and prosperous. That's a number one issue, in my opinion. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, it's if you look at the crime rate, if you look at the employment, until you can fix the bleeding, the first thing you do when you go to triage is you stop the bleeding. And the bleeding is the crime, the bleeding is the unemployment, the bleeding is the dysfunction.
Do you think government can fix that?
I think
government you think that's government's job, is to interfere in the economy? I mean, when government gets that, listen, government is bureaucracy. They need to get the hell out of the way like every other government.
Well, that's wrong. I think government.
What do you mean it's wrong? Look at Venezuela. It's not wrong.
Well, I'm not.
Enterprise.
You're talking
you know what the problem with government is? They're a bunch of Badinskis.
Well,
get out of the way. Let me tell you what government.
We agree on that before you get down the road.
Hold on a minute.
Talk about Venezuela. I'm talking about
if you got elected to city council, you're a government guy. Just let me tell you what government is. Government is a big rock in the middle of a stream. And you know what free enterprise is? And guys like me, we work our way around it. Government is the enemy. Government is evil, and government needs to get out of the way and let free enterprise take over, and we'll fix it. I promise you, we'll fix it.
Let's shut government down.
Yes, I agree.
Let's just shut it down and see.
5% of the federal government, shut it down. The state governments, they're all out of control. The cities, they're out of control. They've got too much money. They've got too much power. They should own no land, no buildings. Shut them down.
Well,
Dave is just half kidding. Go ahead, Dave. Dave, answer.
Well, if you left it to the private sector to provide education, if you leave the private sector to provide public education, a waste treatment plant, roads, and sheriff and police, and all those services, then you, my friend, are right. And if you think that the human being and the nature of the human being will take care of that on its own, then good luck with that strategy. No government of any kind would be the nirvana of those who don't like government. I don't like government. I spent my entire life working for a major corporation, one of the biggest in the world, technology company, and then starting a smaller software company. And I know what it means when you're paying people on a credit card.
Let's just get back to the question, Dave. Right? The question is, you're proposing government improve these neighborhoods. Is that
what I'm proposing is that not government do this. We have way more than enough money in government right now to act as a catalyst with the things that government is tasked to do. We're tasked to do infrastructure. We're tasked to do education. We're tasked to do police. If we do those and take the existing money and do it in a different way, in a private-public partnership which is what we did to revive the city of downtown. We leveraged the local funds that we spent on what we were supposed to do, which was infrastructure, by 13 to 1. 13 to 1. Public, private.
Your government one brought 13 from the private sector? Or
exactly. We put up $1 Chattanooga resources, and we leveraged that by 13 times of direct investment, not indirect, direct investment. And that's what you do to revive all of the others. You take the existing money that you're going to spend on infrastructure and other things and education and deploy it in a smarter way where you get a bang for every dollar, leverages economic development, improves the environment, improves the community, and improves education. We don't do that. We don't have a strategic plan. We just spend money, and when they hadn't got enough money to do things like they're doing it now, they go for a tax increase. I cut taxes 3 times, and we still had the largest investment in the history of the city.
Okay, caller, what's on your mind?
Would you agree with me that government needs to be out of education totally? And I'll tell you why I say this, because I can choose where to buy my shoes and where to get food and so on and so forth. But could you imagine if we take the $500 million that is stolen from property owners in the form of property taxes, and we give that to private institutions to educate children, and parents actually have a choice and they have to compete to get your kid to go to their school? I just left Red Bank High School, and instead of having statues, they have stupid symbols that mean nothing. They're not teaching about the Constitution. They're not teaching about the founders. They're not teaching about anything that has any value.
Nothing about free markets, nothing about liberty.
No wonder why we're turning out a bunch of dummies. And then they want me to hire them. We're turning out a bunch of uneducated, schooled dummies because they're run by socialist Democrats. Government should never be allowed to educate children, ever. It's the most dangerous institution in America are the public schools. I want your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Well, we first started public education around the fact that we needed an educated workforce, and it started in Lowell, Massachusetts, where we had the first industrial revolution in the country of America. And they brought all these girls down from those old rocky New England farms, put them up in dormitories, and they started schools for them. And they were called the Mill Girls. And that was the starting of a public education. And it put America on a track to become what it has become, because you offered an education to most children wouldn't have gotten one.
I want to shift back here. We're talking with Dave Crockett. I want to shift back to this larger question about public investment in infrastructure. One of the essays that Chuck Marone published 7 years ago now about the growth Ponzi scheme, the second part talks about this huge gap, Dave Crockett, between long-term financial commitments and obligations and debts, and the short-term gain of having, when you build out a road, you build out infrastructure such as water pipes and sewer. You have a gain with growth of people moving in and paying taxes and so on, having a bit of economic activity. But in whether it's rural roads or suburban roads or industrial parks, to maintain the out year obligation for repair and maintenance would require a double or triple taxation of what is now current in many cities. How is that a real problem and a real threat here?
Well, I was on a panel, over 20 years ago in South Carolina with a Senate finance chairman from their legislature who was a rock-ribbed Republican or conservative. Put parentheses around that. You're not conservative when you're doing things that are financially they're not good. They lead to insolvency. And that was his first comment. He said, I can't be a conservative and look at a long-term strategy where we go bankrupt. And he said, they finally have gotten it, at least recognized the problem in their legislature. I'm not sure we have yet, that building the infrastructure at the rate they were, that they could predict that within inside of a century, the state of South Carolina would be insolvent. Everything was hunky-dory. They had a new BMW plant coming in, a new Michelin plant, and everybody was cutting ribbons, blowing horns, and celebrating. At the same time, They were building infrastructure at an incredible rate and sending things further and further out with no zoning and no plan. And he said, we have got to get off this merry-go-round.
This is David Tulis. We're talking with Dave Crockett, and we're looking at the prospect of overwhelming infrastructural liability repair costs in the future that are not being accounted for now. And I could not find out this week on what basis of accounting we have in city or county. David Tulis will look at some of these questions in the future, trying to take the long-term perspective.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
Police are on the hunt for a man who walked into the Boost Mobile store on Wilcox demanding money and phones from the clerk at gunpoint. The suspect is described as a man about 6'4".